Hello, everyone. Today I'm talking about what I think is one of the most important topics when it comes to mental health in teens and suicide in teens. It's helping teens avoid a mental health crisis. And there is a huge mental health crisis among teens today, and I'm going to share in a few minutes some things to help you understand just how severe that crisis is. But before we get started, my name is Rusty Ford. I work in the area of suicide prevention and intervention. I do trainings across Washington State in that area. I concentrate on working with churches and community groups, and whenever possible, schools to try and help, uh, stop this epidemic we have of suicide in this country, and especially teen suicide. But when I say I work with, you know, prevention and intervention, there is a difference between suicide prevention and suicide intervention. Intervention is when somebody is thinking about suicide right now, and you know, I teach people how to help that person move from being on the verge of suicide to getting a position where they can get help. Suicide prevention in general is a much broader topic and things that you can do way before a person's either suicidal or just now starting to think about suicide before they move to the crisis stage. My preference in my training, even though they're centered around intervention, is to get people to understand the signs of suicide so that they can catch a person early on before they reach a crisis stage. But I'm making this video because nearly 20% of all our teens are already in a mental health crisis. They're already thinking seriously about ending their life. Uh, and so before I get started, we're going to cover a lot of topics today. And I'm going to try and be brief because, if I covered all these things in depth, this would be a very long video. But if you have any questions, please feel free to comment at the bottom. Also, if you have other ideas about any one point or how to help a teen that's going through any one of these struggles, please comment. The more people participate, the more valuable this video and the discussion around it becomes. So the first point is to say, what is a mental health crisis? A mental health crisis is any time in a person's life where they're thinking of hurting themselves or another, or any situation that prevents them from being able to care for themselves or function effectively in the community. That's a mouthful. Basically, it says, if you're thinking about hurting yourself or thinking about ending your life, and they're two distinct things, a lot of people mix them up, and they'll ask somebody if they're thinking about suicide, if they're thinking about hurting themselves. And, really you don't, if you want to know if they're thinking about suicide, you specifically ask that question because, a person who's thinking about suicide doesn't view their thoughts as hurting themselves. They view it as ending the pain. But, and the other thing is, besides hurting themselves or ending their life, it's an emotional struggle that keeps them from being able to function effectively. One of the best ways of helping a young person avoid a mental health crisis is to recognize the signs that they're moving toward a mental health crisis and the events that can lead to the crisis. So after this slide, I'm going to share some of the signs, and then the rest of the video is going to be dealing with events. I've developed a crisis checklist similar to what some mental health organizations will use to try and define trauma and understand the trauma that a person's going through. Understanding the things that can, the events that can lead to a mental health crisis can help catch it early. And the point is not, that you have to use this and have a literal checklist. It's that you're familiar with these things, and when a teen, whether it's your child, somebody in your youth group, somebody in your school, somebody in your community group, if you're a teen yourself, one of your friends, when you see that some of these things happening, it may mean that they're getting overloaded with more than they can handle. And that can lead to a mental health crisis. Just like adults, some people can handle a lot of trauma and function well. And some teens are that way as well. But teens have a hard time dealing with because they don't a ton of trauma in their life. They've not had enough life experience to know how to handle it. And that's where we come in as adults or friends. But one of the things that adults needs, that teens need most is caring adults in their life. Parents, friends, mentors, whether that's a coach or a teacher, somebody at a volunteer organization they work with, somebody in their youth group, but they need multiple adults that they can talk to about what they're going through. And so they can, learn to build this resilience. And nobody can do it on their own. Nobody can be an island to themselves. And with teens, they don't know who they can talk to many times. And these life events, become overwhelming because they don't know what to do about them. And that's where, if we're paying attention, we can see these things happening, and then we can start listening more carefully and paying more attention to what the teen is going through. And that's not to say if they don't have these events that we don't care enough to be paying attention anyway. It's just once you see these things happening, it should click a little trigger in your brain that says, "Oh, this is many teens can't handle these things, and when they get 1, 2, 3, 4, or more of these things, then they may be heading into a crisis that can be avoided if friends and adults pay careful enough attention and are there and available for them when they need it." So the first of the two things is the signs that somebody's moving into a mental health crisis. These are pretty much the same as with an adult. I'm going to start with the fifth one in the list because it's the most important: changes in mood. If you see a teen or an adult and they suddenly have a change in the mood, they're usually pretty happy and now they're sullen. They're usually outgoing and now they're quiet. If you see these kind of changes, that is a key significant signal to you that this person is moving towards a mental health crisis. Depression, anxiety, mental health issues. If a teen has these, a significant part of the psychology community and psychiatry community believe that depression, or mental health diagnoses are, a mental health crisis. I don't quite buy that because I know so many people that learn to function well in spite of the fact that they've got a mental health diagnosis. But if you've got that diagnosis, then it's much easier to move into crisis. Changes in weight, if they suddenly gain weight or suddenly start losing weight, that's a signal to you that there's something going on. If suddenly they go from an A or a B student to a C, D, or just failing, there's something happening that you need to ask about. Dramatic shifts in sleep habits, neglecting personal hygiene, and withdrawal from normal activities. Anytime anybody anywhere starts to isolate, that's a signal to you that there's something going on in their life that needs to be addressed. And while the video is really about the next point, it's the checklist. I've developed a checklist that will help you, your church, your community group, or school better meet the needs of struggling adolescents and teens. As I mentioned, some counseling groups will use this in their regular counseling practice, and they'll just ask them about all these points. Now, this is my own list. It's, I've seen other lists before. The 32 things in this list are from my experience, and that's why I suggest that if you know something else, you can make a comment. Might end up leading me to amend my list in the future. But In this list, in the description of this video, I have a downloadable version of the checklist. The checklist is in a Microsoft Word format and not a PDF format, so that you can customize it to whatever you're doing. The purpose of the list is to help identify young people who are moving toward an emotional crisis. The goal is to identify that young people that are struggling way before they move into crisis. If you start noticing these signs and you can start talking with the young person, one of the things is the death of a parent. If you pull up alongside of them and provide support, when that happens, you can help prevent them from moving into a mental health crisis later on down the road. And this, as I mentioned, this checklist can be used formally. You can have one for each person that you work with. I really don't recommend that unless you're working with a person in a counseling situation. Mainly, I share this list so that you can just be familiar in your own mind about what things can be a trigger in leading a teen towards a mental health crisis. And one of the reasons I put it in a downloadable form for you is not so that you start filling this out about teens, it's so that you can read over it a few times to get yourself really familiar and have it locked into your brain, the things that you need to be paying attention to help young people avoid a mental health crisis. And so before I get to the checklist, I want to take a brief and quick look at the crisis numbers. And I think one of the best ways of understanding whether somebody is going into crisis is just the suicide numbers that we have out there. Every year, the CDC works with thousands of schools and tens of thousands of students that come up with some information about students and dangerous behavioral habits. One of the areas they cover is suicide and suicide ideation. And so this that you're seeing on the screen right now is the results of the 2019 study. And we don't have the 2020 results out yet. I don't know if they'll have 2020 numbers with this study, since they work with schools, and with most kids at home doing distance learning. I don't know. I know the bulk of the study is the 50,000 plus teens that they actually survey. And so, they may have 2,000 numbers coming out late this year, but this is last year's numbers. So each day in our nation last year in 2019, of course, it's 2021. I started making this video a couple of days ago and I got interrupted. And so this is not actually last year's numbers. This is 2019 numbers. Each day in 2019, there was an average of over 3,700 suicide attempts by young people in grades 9 through 12. And that is over 1,351,000 teens in the United States in 2019 who tried to end their life. And that just boggles my mind. When I said that 20% of students are probably in a mental health crisis, well, in that study, it showed 18.9% of high school students thought seriously about suicide. I think if they're thinking about suicide at all, they're edging into a mental health crisis. But 18.9 of them have thought seriously about it. In that, that's a troubling number. 15.7% have seriously thought enough about suicide to create a suicide plan. And 8.9% of teens in grades 9 through 12 attempted to end their life in 2019. That's up from 7.4% who attempted in 2018. I want to put this in a context that makes it a little easier to understand. If you have a high school in your community with 1,000 students, statistically, there would be 100 and 89 of those students who are thinking seriously about suicide, 157 students who have thought seriously enough to actually make a plan to end their life, and 89 who will have attempted suicide. Based on the 2019 numbers, if those numbers are consistent with right now, you would have 89 who attempted suicide this year. And I know these are staggering. And if you're watching this video, I know you want to do something about it, or you wouldn't have taken the time to click on the link to watch this video. If you're watching this video and you're serious about it, I would encourage you to get some formal training. Two types of training I think are really good. One is mental health first aid and mental health first aid for youth. It depends on whether you work with adults or youth. I think it's great if you have an opportunity to take both classes. And the other one is some type of longer suicide prevention training. You can go online and you can find some free ones. State of Texas has a really great hour-long program, and you can find some others. But to take one in your community, that's at least 4 hours. I lead trainings that go from 4 to 8 hours, but so that you have the time to interact, have time to discuss with people. It's an experience that'll change your life. You'll feel so much more secure and prepared for helping people who are struggling emotionally. This is what the checklist looks like. And so I'm going to break it down into smaller sections. I'm not going to talk in depth about any one of these, except for two, but the rest I'm just going to briefly mention. The idea is for you just to understand that these are crisis events in a young person's life, and an adult, most of them adult's life as well. And so let's move on to the list. Well, here's what it says at the top of the list. I'm not going to go into it because you can read it. The list below contains 32 of the most common things that can lead a young people toward emotional crisis. That said, when any of these things do happen in life, it's a sign that it's time to pay attention. It may not necessarily be a time for action, and and you don't necessarily assume because one of these events have happened that they're moving into a mental health crisis and want to hurt themselves or end their life or hurt somebody else. It does mean, though, with any one of these events, it's time to pay attention. And the more of these events they go through, the more serious and more likely they are to move into a mental health crisis. The first one I've already mentioned, but I do want to talk a little more about. It's one of the two that I want to put some extra emphasis on. If they've been diagnosed with a mental health issue, as I said earlier, that many counselors believe that being diagnosed with a mental health issue is a mental health crisis. I don't really buy, as I said, I don't buy that. I know that it can be, but I know that a lot of teenagers, like adults, are able to function fairly well, even though they know that they have a mental health illness. In fact, quite often, having a mental health diagnosis explains a lot of what's going on in their life. And since now they know what's going on, and now that they're have professionals and caring people around them, building a support network to help them out, the diagnosis can be traumatic, but it also can be something that can lead them into a full, whole, and healthy life and move them in the long term away from mental health crisis. The second one is death of a parent. That's hard for anyone. It's really hard for a teen, even if the teen is not close to their parent that passes away. It's just something about losing a parent that is hard. And then quite often, if there is a barrier between you and that parent, there's an extra load of guilt. The divorce or separation of a parent is a traumatic event that can have strong negative I just went blank. sorry about that, can have negative impacts on their life. Then, if one of the parents remarries, just understand that almost all teens and all young people want their parents to stay together. And if they get divorced, they want them to get back together. I'm not even beginning to suggest that it's wrong to get remarried. Just understand that this can be traumatic to the teen. You have to make choices about your life. You have to live your life. Uh, and, but as you do, just understand some things are going to have a negative impact on a child, and just be prepared to be available and to be helpful. Whether you're the parent or just another caring adult who's having a positive influence in the child's life. The child or young person having a drug or alcohol abuse problem is a very serious traumatic event that can lead toward suicide or mental health crisis. In fact, in my mind, any type of drug or alcohol addiction is a mental health crisis. Because you're on a daily basis harming yourself. Even though you may not realize it, you're not able to cope with your life, and you're not able to live your life in a normal way. So you fall back and use a crutch such as drugs. A family member who abuses drugs or alcohol. We all know teens that struggle that have a drug or alcoholic parent. And so you can understand that would be a stressful influence in a child's life. The next two really could be formed under one, but teens as well as adults respond differently. The death of a loved one from natural causes has one type of trauma. The death of a loved one from an accident has another. I'll give you an example. 3.5 years ago, my dad had a massive heart attack. 2 days after that, I had a sister end her life with suicide. And within the month, my dad died from complications of that heart attack. In the summer, in August, I had open heart surgery. In September, my sister went in for open heart surgery. And 6 hours before her surgery, she had a massive heart attack and died. Well, my dad was in life, heart disease. We were prepared for this. I missed my dad severely, but this wasn't so traumatic. My sister had been suicidal for years, and we've been trying to give her help. But the shock of my sister that was closest to me in age passing away from a massive heart attack when I didn't expect it was a trauma that I was not ready for. And so just be just cautious if they lose anyone close to them, that this is a trauma that can lead towards a mental health crisis. Of course, any major illness to a young person or an injury, physical injury, can play a role in it. The major illness of a family member or a friend. Sometimes some of the most exciting things that can happen can bring emotional trauma. And a new baby in the family, is a huge change, and any significant change can bring trauma into a teen's life, even if that teenager is excited about the baby coming. Just the fact that there's that huge change is something that you go, oh, there's a change happening in this person's life. Let me pay attention to make sure that they're handling this okay. Struggles with family members, parents and siblings. If they're fighting with them, you can understand the emotional trauma that can cause. A parent losing a job, experiencing racism, having people show hatred to you just because of the color of your skin, your sexual preferences, or any other thing that you find about yourself that people choose to show hatred to you for is not healthy and can lead to this type of crisis. Any significant life change, if you work in suicide prevention like me, everybody in the world who's attempted suicide in the past is at a much higher risk of doing it again in the future. And the fact that you've had one just means that, hey, this person, has not been able to handle trauma before. Let me make sure that I'm a good friend or a good family member, and I'm standing beside them, and supporting them. Obviously, in anything, we're not professional counselors. It's not our job to try and fix them when we notice these things. It's just our jobs to know that, this is a person I love and care about, and they've got hurt in their life. I'm going to make sure I'm available to them. I'm going to call them on the phone. I'm going to text them. I'm going to come see them. I'm just going to be around them so that they can share and talk when they need to. Emotional abuse, or physical or sexual abuse. We all can immediately see how that can be traumatic to a teen, and an adult. Sexual assault is raises a person's suicide risk significantly. And if they already have depression, this kind of thing is the type of thing that can push them into a crisis. A breakup with a boyfriend or girlfriend. We all understand that. We were teenagers one time and we had breakups. And if we didn't respond horribly to them, we know that people who think their lives are over when a relationship ends. The other one I wanted to talk a little bit more about is being bullied. And I only want to talk slightly more about this than some of the others, because being bullied today is not the same as it was 25 years ago, or 50 years ago when I was a teenager. Because of the internet and because of cyberbullying, the bullying can become more intense. Typically, when I was growing up, you had one or two bullies and maybe their friends hanging around them. But nowadays, one person targets somebody, and a significant portion of the school can join in. I'm doing a lot of research right now on trying to figure out what schools and communities and families can do to help a child who's being bullied, and what the community, the government, and the schools can do to try and stop the bullying. And so if you have ideas on that, please share in the comments, because it's not my area of expertise. My area of expertise is dealing with teens who are thinking about ending their life because they're being bullied. And I'll tell you up front, the majority, and pretty close to the vast majority of teens that I've ever talked to are thinking about suicide, are being bullied. And they're being bullied night and day, showing hatred, and being attacked verbally and sometimes physically every single day of their life. And even if they don't have any of these other stressors, this one alone is enough to push a teenager over the edge. And so, it's not an obvious one. Most teenagers aren't going to come home and say, but last night I had 73 comments on a post suggesting I should die, I should kill myself, the world would be better off without me, I'm ugly, I'm fat, and even personal threats. Because I know teens that get on a regular basis people, these cowards on the internet, threatening to end their life, and threatening some of the most horrible things you can imagine. So just if they bring it up, or you just ask a question, just understand that they, this is something they may be going through and not really willing to talk about. But, if they do, just be there, available to them, to be their friend, to be their support person. And if need be, help get them into a place where they can get counseling, help them work with the school to end this. It's a huge topic that I don't have time for. But I'll leave it at that. But do feel free to share ideas with me, because, while I'm reading a lot on the internet, I would like to talk to people with experiences and how they handle it, what their school has done, what their community has done. So if you've got the time and are willing to share with me, I would appreciate it. I moved to a new city. We've all seen the teens that had to do that. be picked up and moved away from all their existing friends. You, I, anytime I see that, in fact, I am liable to, if I meet a teen and they say they just moved to a new city, I'm liable to ask them after a couple of questions, teens that are forced to move from their friends sometimes think about suicide. Are you thinking about suicide? Because I know just how traumatic this can be. It's one that they get over quite often, but if they're already depressed, or they already have a mental health condition, or they already have some of these other stressors in their life, this can be a huge thing. And people who are questioning their sexual orientation, I'm going to bring up the last point in the thing here. Students who are sexually active are 2.5 times more likely to end their life with suicide. People who are questioning their sexuality are 5 to 8 times more likely to do it. People who come out as gay, homosexual, people who are transsexual, are much more. I mean, if you know somebody like this, I mean, I'm not saying like this in any negative way. I'm just knowing if this is, a person that know, let them always know that you care, because it's traumatizing. I don't know all the reasons why. I just know that that this is one of the things that are most likely to lead a teen into a crisis situation. Pregnancy of self or girlfriend. If the girl gets pregnant, it's traumatic, but it's also traumatic for the young man. And this is one because they don't want their parents to know. They're trying to keep it a secret, which adds more trauma to the event. And last ones I'll go over real quick. Problems with schoolwork. When they're really struggling at school, it causes problems. Problems with friends. Violence in the school or community. I mean, this can be a personal attack of themselves, but if somebody's violent to one of their friends, or there's a murder in the community, a friend is sexually assaulted, I don't have to say much about that. Stay-at-home parent gets a job. They're used to the support person be there when they get home, and this suddenly changes. Again, it's not saying anything negative about getting a job. It's just that it's, just knowing that, you need to pay attention if this happens, whether you're the parent or another support person, that, during this, especially this first few weeks of adjusting, they may need a little more support. Obviously, if your home is burned or burglarized or vandalized, you might not realize it, but emotional trauma, emotional crisis is extremely high among first-year college students that move away from home to someplace different. Provides a tremendous amount of trauma to their lives. That's something college counselors are familiar with, but as parents and friends in the community, while this is an exciting time and they may really be looking forward to going to college, knowing that this is a radical change, and radical change can push somebody toward a suicide crisis, especially if they already have depression or anxiety. And the last one is, that I hadn't talked about, is sexual assault. And, we don't have to have anything. I'm trying to, this. So, to sum it all up, when any of these things are happening, and I say pay attention, this one, the signs of a mental health crisis is what you look for. You look for changes in their mood. You look for, your parent dies, and you look for sudden mood changes. If they stop eating or overeating because of any of these things on the list, can trigger, either one of these, so that there's a sudden, and so that's saying, hey, there's a this person may be moving toward mental health crisis. if they stop sleeping, or they want to sleep all the time, if they stop taking care of themselves, or they start isolating. I mean, these are some of the things I'm suggesting pay attention to. And, there may be some things you can do. You may be able to talk to them, friend them. Uh, if their mood has changed significantly, you can talk about mental health. Uh, as a parent, you can talk to the school counselor. You can look at getting your child into camp. I mean, there's so many things that you can do, but none of them get done if you miss it. And that's what I do in suicide prevention is I teach people the signs and teach people how to interact with a person who is suicidal. But my main thing is that you don't miss it. And I'll end it with a close friend of mine last year. I don't see this person often, 2 or 3 times a year, but I have family members that see the person quite often, and they ended their life this year with suicide. And none of us saw the signs, and several people in the family and friends of this person have been through my training. They know what to look for, and they missed it. And sometimes the signs just are not there. Sometimes a suicide or a mental health crisis can come suddenly and out of nowhere, and we don't see it. But most of the time, there are signs. Most of the time, we've got these signs that right here on the list that I just shared with you, and we've got the trauma events that I shared with you, so that if we know that these things can, cause distress to a teen or an adult or an adolescent, when they go through them, many times all they need to keep from going into a crisis is to have 2 or 3 people who are standing there with them, 2 or 3 people that they can talk to, 2 or 3 people that love them, two or 3 people that spend some time listening to them. And that's what I'm encouraging to do. Sometimes it's going to take more than that, but nothing's going to happen if you don't notice the signs. And so I ask you to be, vigorous, and intentional, pay extreme attention, not just to teens or adolescents, but to everybody that you're really close to. Pay attention. We live in a world where everything is about us. And I'm encouraging you to not make everything about you, to make everything about, you're not going to neglect yourself for the most part, but include those people close to you, and have what they're going through just as important to yourself as what you're going through. And hopefully, when the time comes that you need it, when you have a parent who dies, or your house is burglarized, or you're sexually assaulted, or any other thing on this list, they'll be there for you. I wish you the best. God bless.